Thanks very much, Rich. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us today. I'm really excited to show you this new range of tools from Boris FX. As an editor and a visual effects artist, it's really, really exciting to be able to now have such a high level of interchange between all of the various products that we know and love. So I'm going to start off in Boris Soundbite. Boris Soundbite is a new product from Boris FX, and the first thing I'd like to do is just to introduce you to the interface. What Boris Soundbite is going to allow us to do is actually search for media or quotes or phrases, search audio basically for the soundbite or the word or the phrase that we're looking for, either in our raw media or inside of our FCP project. So here's the interface. Let's have a quick look at that. Now, the first off, at the top here, we've got a speech area. And underneath that, here's the box where I'm going to type in the speech that I'm actually looking for. So if I'm looking for a word or phrase, I'm going to type it in here. And over here on the right-hand side, next to that, is a score dialog. And so if I take the score down, what I'm saying to Boris Soundbite is be less specific, be more tolerant, and give me more results that may or may not quite match exactly the search term that I'm using. If I want to be more specific, then I'm going to take the score up here more towards 90 or 95% and say give me fewer results, but be more accurate. The first search I'm going to do today is on a scene where the guys are sort of talking in whispered tones and perhaps talking over each other. So I'm going to notch down to about 65% accuracy there. Underneath that, we have this other attributes bar. And this allows us to search across things, standard metadata columns and fields such as file name, length, comments, labels, shot take, etc. Then we can actually choose an argument: is, contains, starts with, ends with, or does not contain, and then type in our search term there. So we've got two ways of searching, either on speech or on common metadata fields. So that's the first thing to understand about Boris Soundbite. The next thing is that I like to describe the other two windows in the application as almost like wings. On the left-hand side, we have the watched folders area. And on the right-hand side, we have the preview area. This is where we're actually going to see the results of the search that we do. So these are the two sides to the application. In order to get to use the application, what we need to do is either use the dialog box down here to add a watched folder or add a Final Cut Pro project, or in my case what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my media drive and I'm just going to drag and drop a folder with some media into the interface. So I'm going to go to my source media here, and then I have some ProRes material for an indie film. So I'm going to take that, drag that, and drop that on the watched folders area. And as you can see, what's going to happen now is I'm given a confirmation dialog. The language pack that I'm using is North American English. And then do I want to choose a specific channel? Maybe I've got lav on 1 and boom on 2. Maybe I want to exclude the boom. I could do that, or I could just mix all the channels together. As soon as I choose that, notice I get a little circle here, and that indicates that the content is now being scanned. It's been scanned, the circle disappears, and now I'm ready to start my search. So that's how I add a watched folder or a Final Cut Pro project. I've already got a Final Cut Pro project already loaded up here called LS. Now, how do I choose what I'm searching within? Well, that's this search box right here. I could choose to search across all searchable media, so I could do a combo search where I'm looking at both raw media and a Final Cut Pro project, or I could choose to drill in, and in this particular case I'm going to select the ProRes Indie Film folder, and I'm just going to be searching within that area on my system. So to start out with then, let's just do a very simple search for a single word. So I'm looking for the word sweating, like so. And that's going to bring up some results. And because this is a film-based material, single camera shoot style, what we've got here are 3 results. Each of them, as you can see, are from a different take, and I've got a single hit of the word sweating in each of those takes. So if I wanted to now, I could go ahead and load that up.
Sweating profusely and your left eye keeps twitching.
Go to the next one.
No. Sweating profusely and your left eye keeps twitching.
And the next.
Sweating profusely and your left eye keeps switching.
So you can see very, very quickly indeed I can get to exactly the search term that I'm interested in, and I can play them back to back, either using these arrows here or the arrows on my keyboard. So I can compare performance if necessary, or compare intonation within a particular delivery. So that's really nice, being able to go and look for exactly what I'm looking for, or perhaps I'm looking to replace a fluffed word or a fluffed line, and I just want to find something with similar or identical intonation. Really, really nice and powerful. Let's go and now search for something a bit longer. Let's look for a phrase, nothing to report. There we go. And again, we've gotten 3 takes which match that criteria with a single hit per take. Now notice the hits turn up as these blue markers here. So when I double click on the first take, you'll see that we'll go straight to the blue marker that represents nothing to report, and we'll play back from there.
Nothing to report. You all right, John?
Next.
Nothing to report. You all right, John? Nothing to report. You all right, John?
So you can see here that's the blue marker that's representing the hit, and this is the number of hits here. And you can see that I also get a report, what's the time in on the clip, and also what's the score, how satisfied is Boris Soundbite that we've matched the search criteria. Let's look for another one now. In this case, I'm going to look for stall next to me, and the reason I'm doing this is because in this instance, they're actually whispering to each other. Let's see what we get this time.
Stall next to me, and you just left him. Stall next to me, and you just left him.
So you can see that the Nexidia phonetic recognition engine is really doing a wonderful job of identifying these terms, regardless of whether we're in, full speech, or whether we're whispering, or whether there's perhaps even a little bit of background noise. We're going to get the results that we want. Now, having done this work, bear in mind I haven't even gone into Final Cut Pro yet. So having done this work, how do I get the results of this search work into Final Cut Pro? Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Final Cut Pro, and I'm going to show you that I don't have my film project open yet. So I'm going to go ahead and open my film project. Here it is. And it's a completely blank project, as you can see. Now, back in Soundbite, if I want to take the results of my work now over as clips into my Final Cut Pro project, all I need to do is either individually select or group select those search results, and now I can choose Export New Clip. Click Export New Clip. I have to give the clip a name, so I'm going to call this the Stall Next Clip, and then I'm going to choose which Final Cut Pro project I'd like to save these clips into, and choose Export. Okay, now we've exported 2 clips to Final Cut Pro. Let's go back over into Final Cut Pro, and now inside of my film project, as you can see, we now have those 2 clips. If I load one of the clips, you can see that we have access to all of the material, all the way from the slate, all the way to the end of the take there, but marked is indeed the stall next to me. And if I play from that point forward, you'll hear that.
The stall next to me, and you just left him.
That's really great. One of the things that I love about this, though, is notice that now there are these disclosure triangles next to my Final Cut Pro clips. So I can load the entire clip, or if I want to, I can just double-click on the locator, the marker itself, and load the subclip from that point forward.
Stall next to me, and you just left him.
So that's really, really powerful. I love that. It's instantaneous, as you can see. We have very quick searchability and very quick ability to get that into Final Cut Pro. Okay, now let's go over to a different project here. I've got this project called LS. And inside of LS, I have a number of interview selects. Now, I've already done a search on this search term, so I'm going to get rid of some of these markers here and show you from scratch how this works. So you can see that I've got some disclosure triangles on clips 6 through 12 there, but at the moment I've got no disclosure triangles on clip 1, clip 2, clip 3, and clip 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that, go back into SoundBite. I'm going to have a look at my LS project now. So I'm actually going to choose to search within just the LS project. And again, I can choose a simple search term. I know that Larry talks about a grasshopper at some point in his dialogue there, so I'm going to search for that. So now I've got a clip with grasshopper in it, and you can see I've actually got this time 8 hits. So previously we were dealing with single camera material, so we're likely to only get a single hit per take. In this case, we're searching in interview material, so the interviewee is likely to repeat the phrase numerous times, and so that's what we've got here. If I load up Larry's clip, we'll see we've got 8 hits for the word grasshopper.
Grasshoppers. Grasshoppers taking over his field. Grasshoppers are bad for rangeland. Grasshoppers good for. Grasshoppers, turns out, are...
So you can see that we can search across all of the clips and not only find a clip that contains the search term that we're looking for, but we can find all of the various different places within that clip that that search term is located. So that's really, really powerful. And if I wanted to now, I could go ahead and do the same with a phrase. So we'll look for that phrase that we looked for earlier, permaculture design. And there we go. I've actually misspelled it, but I still got some results. So let me fix that. There we go. And this time we get a whole boatload more results. And you can see here that I've got anything ranging from a single hit,
permaculture design,
to 7 hits across my clip. Now, what I'd like to show you is that rather than selecting these clips this time and exporting them as new clips, which frankly for me as an editor is just going to sort of cause clutter within my project, unless I happen to want to work that way. But for me, what I'd rather do is take advantage of this functionality within Boris SoundBite, where I can select the clips, and rather than export them as new clips, I can just export the markers. So if I click here, export markers, we know exactly which project we're going to because we're already selected there, and the markers have now been exported. So if I go back into Final Cut Pro, you'll remember that I had switched off, I had gotten rid of my markers in the first 4 clips here, but there they are again. They've been reapplied to those clips. So you can in fact delete and reapply, delete a search term from within inside of Boris SoundBite or inside of Final Cut Pro, go back, redo a search, and you'll get those markers reapplied to your clips. So the clips are still in the bin the way they were, but now of course I can go directly to those hits within the clip itself.
Permaculture design.
Every time they sell a seed of media proposal, it's much dollars.
Permaculture design, but I also teach that.
So that's really, really wonderful functionality, and I love the fact that I can either export the clips or I can export the markers into my project. So very, very flexible indeed. And by the way, if I go over into Boris SoundBite, I should just point out that in Boris SoundBite, there's the ability to also save my searches as well. So if I did a specific search that I wanted to save for future use, I could do that also. Okay, so that's Boris SoundBite. So as you can see, I can start to use that even before the editorial process has begun. Once we get into the editorial process, a reality of today's production is that oftentimes we need to exchange sequences. In this case, we're going to look at exchanging sequences between Final Cut Pro and Avid Media Composer. I'm actually using Final Cut Pro 703 and Avid Media Composer 553, and I'm running on the Lion OS here. So let's go back into Final Cut Pro, and I'd like to show you I've got a sequence here in a project called GL. I'm going to open up the sequence. And what I'd like to do is just spend a couple of moments looking at the sequence so you're familiar with it, so that you can verify when I go into Avid Media Composer that we did indeed bring across all of this rich information that we've already, all the hard work that we've already put into the sequence. So let's first off look at the music tracks down here on A3 and A4. I'd like to point out that the way that I'm mixing these in this particular case on this sequence is that you can see minus 14.5 there. What I'm doing is I'm actually using the razor blade to cut the music track and then cross dissolve up to minus 6.8, cut the track, and then cross dissolve back down to minus 14.5 when our presenter is talking again. So that's what's going on here on the audio tracks. And as you can see, I'm going to bring across that level data and the crossfades. Now, up on A1, A2, and V1, we've got this interview material here. And we've also got some native Final Cut Pro graphics that I'm going to be bringing across as well. But more than that, more than bringing accurate clip and track-based compositions across from Final Cut Pro into Avid Media Composer, what I can also do are bring my effects across as well. So, for example, if I were to double-click on this clip here and go into the Motion tab, you can see that I've actually scaled this clip up to 146%. And the reason I did that is that I needed to do a resize and a repo, because the way that our interviewee ended up answering this particular question was to somebody else who was off camera the other side. So what I did is I blew it up and was able to move him a little bit more into the center of the frame so that it feels just a little bit more natural to the viewer when we're watching that clip back. So that's a Final Cut Pro DVE using the Motion tab. So that's a native effect that I'm going to be bringing across. So look for that when we go into Media Composer. Further down the timeline here, you can see I've got some B-roll clips up on V2 there, and then I've got a cross dissolve to another B-roll clip up on V3 there. And this time what I'd like to point out is that on this clip, I've got another filter. This time it's the BCC Velocity Remap. So what I'm trying to call out here is I'm going to be bringing across both native DVE or filters and also third-party DVE and filters. In this case, it's actually the Boris Velocity Remap, as I said. And then I've got my transition effects. This is a native Final Cut Pro dissolve through to my next piece of B-roll. Then I've actually got a BCC linear wipe between the rocks there and the green shoots coming in. And as we move further down the timeline, we've got other effects as well. For example, between these two B-roll shots, I've got the BCC lens transition, which adds that nice blur and cross dissolve. I've also got the BCC texture wipe, like so. Another cross dissolve, and then a lovely swish pan at the end there. So I'm going to be bringing all of that material across into Media Composer. Not just the music and the levels, but the transitions, all of the material, plus all of the filters and the transition effects. So let's do that. Let's go across now into Media Composer and do that. So how do we do that? Well, courtesy of the fact that I've installed Boris FCP Transfer onto my system now, when I select my sequence and I choose File, Export, I now get some special choices. And I want to export an Avid AAF via Boris Transfer FCP. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a location that makes sense. So what I like to do is I'd like to go into my Avid Projects folder, into AAF Incoming, and I like to separate my material out by frame rate as well. Once I've chosen that location, I can choose Export, and now I'm going to get the Boris Transfer FCP dialog box, which is going to confirm some of the choices that I'd like to make. Now, as you can see on this first tab, the Sequence tab, I'm being asked, do you want to export for Avid Media Composer, or do you want to export for Avid DS? Well, in this case, it's going to be Media Composer, but it's very important to understand that you can indeed choose to export to Avid DS as well. So we just choose that radio button and off we'd go. Also, I'm going to automatically use project settings based on the sequence settings in Final Cut Pro. But as you can see, if I wanted to, I could go and override that, choose a different compressor, a different frame size, etc., etc. Audio Video tab, what's going to be happening here is that I'm choosing to apply the audio levels that I applied in my sequence down here, but I'm actually going to ignore my audio pan in this case. And then under the video, I'd like to draw your attention to this checkbox here, Replace Tape for AMA Relink. This is going to enable me to bring the entire sequence across and make use of the Avid AMA Relink to instantaneously bring these clips back online. And then under the Effects tab, I've got various choices. For example, if there's a missing transition, something that isn't translatable, then it can just be replaced with a dissolve, which I particularly like. You know, at least being alerted to the fact that there should be a transition of this length at that point in the sequence is really going to help troubleshoot if there is something that doesn't come across quite as we expect. But generally speaking, I found the application to be extremely robust and to bring across most of the effects that I'm using right here without any problem at all. So let's go ahead, click OK. You can see the export process there. If there is a feature that's not supported, it'll be taken across into the HTML and you can read up on what that is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide Final Cut Pro. I'm going to go over to Avid Media Composer, and I'm actually going to create a brand new project here. I'm going to just call this Boris Effects. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'd like to prove to you that I've got no smoke and mirrors going on here. This is a brand new project with no content in it yet, and I'm going to bring the AAF across, and that's what's going to start my process here inside of Media Composer. So here's my initial blank bin, File, Import, and I'm going to choose that same location again. I'm going to go back to my Avid projects, to my AAF incoming, and there's my sequence there, GL sequence 01, AAF. So I'm going to select that, choose to open it up. It's now been imported, and if I make my bin a little bit bigger here, you can see that the sequence has been brought across. Let's load that up into the record viewer. And there it is. There's the sequence just as we had it in Final Cut Pro. All of the tracks, all of the clips, and indeed all of the effects. And in my bin as well, courtesy of the AAF import, I've got representations. I've got the actual empty clips. They're not linked to any media yet, but here are all the clips that comprise my sequence. So now I've got two choices, well, three choices really, about how I go about bringing this material back online. I'm going to create a new bin, and I'm going to call this sequence, and I'm going to open it up separately to my main bin there. And I'm going to move my sequence across into here, and as I relink the various different pieces of media, I'll put them in this bin so that by the time I'm finished, I'll have my sequence and all the relinked media that I need for that sequence. Now there are three different ways, as I said, of bringing these clips back online. I could select the clips, and if they came from tape-based material, obviously I could go to the clip menu and I could say batch capture. Alternatively, I could choose to batch import my clips. So let me show you an example of that right now. We've got this audio track here, this music track. Let me turn on the waveform so you can see it's currently empty, and if in fact if I play it back, you can see there's nothing jumping in the VU meters there right at the moment. So let's take Sadie's thing, the music track that we're using, and choose Clip, Batch, Import. Offline clips only. You can see that courtesy of the AAF, the path has already been found. Let's go ahead and import that onto my media drive. And as you can see, the clip has come back online. The waveforms have been drawn in the sequence, and if we play back, we've now started bringing our media back online. So we could use capture, we could use batch import. What else could we do? Well, you saw me check that box for AMA relink. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to bring my interview selects here, GL8, 2, and GL21. I'm going to bring those back online. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to choose File, Link to AMA Files, and I'm going to go to my source media folder, and I'm going to return to exactly the same source media folder that I used initially when I imported the clips into Final Cut Pro. So I've got my ProRes interview selects here, I've got my GL selects, and I know in this case I could bring them all in, but I'm going to selectively bring in clip 2, clip 8, and clip 21, like so. Click open, they're going to come back online. There are the clips now available for playback.
Architecture.
And if I now take my sequence and I choose clip, relink, I'm now going to relink my sequence to those AMA clips that I just brought back online. So let's just talk about the relink dialog for a moment here. Now, the one thing I'm going to definitely turn off here is relink only to media from the current project. Obviously, this project was started in Final Cut Pro, has only just been created in this system here, so it doesn't make any sense to have that on. I'm going to look across all available drives. I'm going to choose Allow Relinking of Imported AMA Clips by Source File Name and uncheck the match case when comparing tape and source file names. I'm also going to loosen up my relink criteria here slightly. I'm just going to say, hey, choose any HD video format, highest quality, and create me a new copy of the sequence. Click OK. The relink process takes place. I now get my relinked sequence, and you can see that now not only do we have the music online, but I also have my interview clips online as well. Now, the B-roll clips are still offline, and the reason I'm doing this in chunks is to show you that you've got the flexibility. You've got the flexibility to import some media, capture some other media, AMA relink some other media, and you don't have to do it all in one pass. You can see that I've got a number of B-roll clips here that also need to be brought back online. So now I'm going to go and do a second pass in order to bring those back online. So File, Link to AMA Files. I've got my ProRes B-roll here. I'll select all of those, bring them back online. And now I can take the same sequence again and just run back through the relink dialog. It's as simple as that. Because all the choices have already been set, I'm good there. Just going to choose to relink again. And now I've got a final version of my sequence that is relinked to the interview material as well as to the B-roll material. The final thing that I'm going to do here before we inspect this and make sure it's all as it should be is I'm going to bring my FCP titles back online as Avid titles. So the way to do that is that I'm going to go into effects mode. I'm going to choose to edit the title. You can see that I'm actually going to go into title tool, not marquee, although I could choose either. And I'm just going to recenter these clips here. But the very act of going into title tool basically causes Media Composer to read the metadata brought across by Boris Transfer FCP and allow us to regen these titles as Avid media inside of Avid Media Composer. So as I say, I'm just going to go and edit the title, bring it back online. I could leave it like that, but I can see that I just need to center these up very slightly. Save that, and then the final one in the sequence is down here. Let's bring that back online as well. And there we go. So what we've done in very short order is that we've managed to bring back online all of the titles, the music, and check this out. Remember earlier on we looked at the beginning of the Final Cut Pro sequence, and we've done this repo and resize on Jeff's first quote here. So if I pop myself into effects mode, we can explore what's going on here. The native Final Cut Pro DVE that we applied under the Motion tab there has been brought across as a native Avid 3D warp. And so that's very, very smooth indeed. Nothing to report there. We can move on, continue going down the sequence, and have a look at the results of our other work as well. Here we've got our cross dissolve from V2 up to V3 as we had before, and we've got our effect there with the velocity remap, which is taking place on this rippling water. Again, if I go into effects mode, you can see there it is. There's the BCC velocity remap. And of course, the advantage of being able to do all of this, bring all of these clips in, and the effects non-baked in, soft effects essentially, is that now I could continue, tweaking these effects to get them exactly how I want them to be, or of course change them or swap them out completely. There's the linear wipe that we put on earlier as well. So you can see I'm bringing across all of the filters or DVEs along with all of the transition effects as well. There's the lens transition there. Let's go back into effects mode just so you can see. There's the lens transition. There's the textured wipe brought across from Final Cut Pro, a regular native dissolve, and then finally there's that swish pan that we'd applied in Final Cut Pro as well. So hopefully what we've done now is shown you how easy it is to bring a full sequence from Final Cut Pro with native text, with native effects, both transitions and filters, into Media Composer. Reconstitute the media using either batch capture, batch import, or AMA relinking, and wow, I got to tell you, as an editor, this is exciting to me. Dealing with EDLs is not something that I really want to do in the 21st century, and this is just taking the whole game to an entirely different level. So, that said, let's get out of this project, because I want to now show you the reverse direction. How do we take a sequence from Media Composer, and I'm going to choose the Permaculture Design project here. How do we take a sequence from Media Composer and bring it over into Final Cut Pro? So here in my Permaculture Design project, I've got my sequence bin. Let's load that up. So here's my sequence. This is with Larry, the guy whose media we were searching earlier for grasshoppers and things like that. He tells a wonderful story that illustrates his design principles using grasshoppers and cows and turkeys and all sorts of things. So, so what have we got here? Well, this time what I'd like to draw your attention to is the fact that here on the music tracks here, let me just make my tracks a little bit larger for you. Here on A3 and A4, this time, instead of using the razor blade or the add-edit approach to audio mixing, where I slice the track and just change the values on either side, this time I'm actually using keyframes. So you can see here, if I click on the keyframe, down here in the bottom area of the timeline, we're going to see the readout. That's at 0 dB. If I go to the next keyframe, you can see that's down there at -12 dB. So I'm going to be bringing my audio across this time, my audio level or pan information across using keyframes rather than the technique that I showed you earlier. Also, we've got native Avid titles. So these are titles that were created either in Title Tool, excuse me, or Marquee. And so I'm going to be bringing those across into Final Cut Pro as well. We've got our interview material. And of course, we've got effects. Again, I did a similar thing here. What I did is I actually selected the clip and I applied, go into effects mode here, you can see I applied a resize to this particular clip. More than that though, this time what I did is I applied keyframes at the beginning and the end of the clip, and I'm actually scaling from 118% up to 128% during the course of the shot. So I'm actually adding a little bit of a push in.
Stick thinking, sort of how do we solve our issues with...
So it's a really subtle push in, but there it is. So it's a native Avid DVE this time, the resize. What else have we got going on in here? Well, let's zoom in a little bit and see what we've got. Now here, just after this title, I've got something a bit different this time. Here, I've actually got a background graphic, this green texture here on V1. And then on V2, I've actually got the Texas state here. And there's a couple of things going on. So let's have a look at what's going on here. On V2, I'm going to drill down. I'm going to actually go inside and look. So you can see what I've got I've actually got the matte key effect. This is actually an alpha channel graphic, so all of the surrounding area here is transparent. This is the opaque area. I've got this matte key effect, and I've actually gone in and manipulated the matte key effect. You can see I've done a little bit of cropping to take away any sort of black edges that I might get, and I've also done some scaling. From the very beginning of the effect, I'm going from 400% scaling down to 100%, like so. So there's my matte key effect, and there's my scaling and my cropping on that. Now if I go up a level, you can see that that is nested inside of another effect. And here is the effect. It's the BCC lens blur. And what we're doing here is we're blurring in. So I've got my iris scale up at 15 there. I'm blurring, I'm going down to 0. It holds at 0 to here, and then we blur back out at the end. So I've got a nested effect, and then I've got my BCC lens flare on top. And then just coming out of that, I've got my background is swish panning out, and there's a slight delay, and then Texas swish pans out as well. Let's look a bit further down the timeline. What else we got going on? We've got a transition from V1 up to V3 here. Let's switch that on so you can see that take place. There we go. And then we come through from the grass to our friend the grasshopper, who we mentioned earlier. And in this case, again, I've got my matte key effect, and I've also got, as you can see, scaling going on the matte key effect as well. And again, then I've got my swish pan out like so. Now the grasshopper and the Texas state, both of those are in fact alpha channel graphics. They have an alpha channel brought in with them. That's why we get this key icon on them. Notice over here I've got my turkey, and my turkey doesn't have that key icon on it. And then the reason for that is that the turkey is in fact a luma key. If I go into effects mode here, you can see that I've applied the BCC linear luma key. If I bypass it for a second, you can see that this was actually brought in on a white background. Now obviously this could be a chroma key as well. I'm just proving out the point that we are able to take complex effects like keys, chroma keys, luma keys across with the sequence as well. Okay, great. And then before we actually move this over, let's just have a look. We've got a couple of dissolves, and then we've got our lens transition again at the end there. Okay, so without any further ado, how are we going to export this? Well, I'm going to select all of my tracks, make sure I'm bringing all of the tracks across, select the clip, or the sequence actually, rather, in my bin, and then File, Export. And here, what I'm doing is I'm choosing an AAF link. If I go to my options here, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm choosing to just link, don't export the media for both video and audio. And I'm going to be placing it this time in the AAF outgoing. There we go. And choose Save. The AF composition is made out of the Avid sequence, saved in that location. Let's go ahead and hide this. Go across to Final Cut Pro. And now let's go to the LS project here. And you can see that I've just got bins 1 through 8 present at the moment. And you're going to see another bin crop up in just a moment. So I'm going to also close this sequence down here so that we can see everything come in fresh. File, Import, Avid AAF via Boris Transfer FCP, and in this case it was AAF outgoing, and there's the LS01 AAF. So I'm going to open that up. We're going to see our dialog box again, our Boris Transfer FCP dialog box. Same types of things. What sequence preset would I like to use, or would I like to just automatically override that on the basis of the AAF file? Add media to a separate bin, link to original source references, either MXF and AIF only, or perhaps any. And then there's also this Reconnect Media button here. Let me show you that. If I click into there, I'm going to get a list of all of the media that's been found, and if any media isn't found, then we can choose to locate it. So I'm going to choose the AIF file here. I'm going to go Locate Files. I'm going to go to my Source Music, to my Giant Blue Music folder, and choose, I think it was called, in this case, Cyclodrone. Yeah. Thanks, by the way, to Yasin Hanif of Giant Blue Music for supplying the music for this webinar. Very much appreciated. So choose to open that up. Now that falls into this category here as located. And then you might be wondering, well, what are these here? And I'm just going to give you a flag. Having played with this a fair amount now, what I'm finding is that the AAF is saying, hey, there's some media associated with the text that you had in your sequence. The clue here is shared Avid projects. This means it's really pointing to a metadata location, not a media location. And the great thing is that essentially we can ignore these because Boris Transfer FCP is going to, once again, take the metadata that's coming out of Avid Media Composer and allow us to reconstitute those titles immediately in Final Cut Pro. So with everything back online, I'm going to choose OK. I'll show you the audio video tab. I can ignore tracks if I want to. And again, I've got my effects tab as well. Click OK. You can see the import progress. All of the XML data is brought across. And actually, my bad, I meant to bring this into the LS project, but in fact, I've shown you some additional functionality, haven't I? I've shown you the fact that I can also bring it into a brand new project if I didn't have one waiting. So there we go, happy accident. But you can see here that all of the media is being brought across inside of the media bin. And then if I load up the LS01 exported sequence, straight away you can see that you know, Final Cut Pro has just linked directly to all of that media. It's also regenerated the Avid graphics, so that's become a Final Cut Pro native graphic now. And if I switch on my keyframes, you can see the keyframes on the audio have been respected. They exist as well. All of my interview clips are online. And if we move across, let's have a look at those effects that we've created. By the way, here's Larry. If I double-click on Larry, remember we've done that very subtle push-in on him. So in the Motion tab here, you can see that we've actually gone from 118 up to 128, just like we had inside of Avid Media Composer. So you're not just bringing the effects across, you're bringing the keyframes for the effects across as well. Really, really powerful. Look at this as well. Here we've got our green background with our Texas on it. The scaling that I've done within the nest has been respected. And of course, if I load up the Texas flag here and look at my filters, there's my BCC lens flare as well, coming in at the beginning, holding, and then coming back in at the end as we move towards the swish pans that we had offset and then out to the next interview clip. Again, we also have our dissolve from V1 to V3, cross dissolve back through to the grasshopper. The grasshopper scale has been respected. Again, back out to our interview material. Remember, Texas and the grasshopper were both alpha channel supported media. The turkey, however, not so much. So if I go into there, you can see there's my BCC linear lumic here, and of course there's the mat that we created, and so on. So again, really bringing across the gamut of effects here in terms of native cross dissolves, native filters, as well as third-party transitions and third-party filters, or DBEs. And that essentially shows the two-way process between Final Cut Pro and Avid Media Composer using Boris Transfer FCP. Really, really wonderful functionality. Now, what I'd like to do next is show you another product, and this is called Boris Transfer AE. And as the name suggests, what it's going to allow us to do is do a very similar thing. It's going to allow us to take sequences along with all of the tracks and clip information and effects and keyframes from Final Cut Pro and move that sequence into Adobe After Effects. So let's do that right now. I've got this. I've got another project that I'd like to open up. So let's open up the project. It's called FCP Composite. Just choose that. And you can see here that we've got a sequence that is comprised of a number of different video layers. Some are running concurrent to each other. Some are just overlapping for transition purposes. Across the entire top of the composition, I also have a little bug that I've put up in the left-hand corner here. And the whole thing has been timed out to the music track. I've also got some sync material here and some SFX. I'm going to bring all of this across into Adobe After Effects. Now obviously, usually when I go to After Effects, I'm just going to lay out my clips like this and then use the power of After Effects to begin to composite them and meld them together how I see fit. But just to show you how far the support extends, I also pulled a key here on this young couple against the bark background there. And you can see that it's a BCC chroma key there. There's the matte, there's the key. These guys were originally on a green screen background. So if I disable the effect, you can see that's how we started the clip. And I'm going to be bringing that across into Adobe After Effects as well. And what I'd like to point out to you is that here at the beginning of the chroma key effect, I've also got a little cross dissolve coming in and a cross dissolve going out as well. And in fact, what will happen is Boris Transfer AE will remove the transition and then reapply it as an opacity keyframe on the clip instead. So how do we do this? Very similar process basically to what we just did. We're going to take the sequence, highlight it in the bin, File, Export. Only this time what we're going to do is we're going to export an XML. So I'm going to choose XML. I'm going to use version 5. Click OK. I'm going to choose my XML outgoing folder. I like to keep things nice and organized so I know exactly which sequence is going where and for what reason. And now I'm going to hide Final Cut Pro, launch up Adobe After Effects. So you can see I'm launching it from scratch again. No smoke and mirrors. I'm doing this live for you so that you can see exactly how the functionality works. Let me close my little tip of the day there. And I think I also need to continue my trial. Very good. All right. So I've got a completely blank project here. Let's go ahead, File, Import. And I'm going to be importing a Final Cut XML via Boris Transfer AE. So let's go back to our FCP projects, to our XML outgoing. There's my composite example. Let's select that. Let's open that up. And now you should start to recognize this dialog box. Very much the same as going between FCP and Avid Media Composer. Do I want a composition preset? Do I want to reconnect media? Let's have a look. Looks like we're all good there. Layers and tracks. In this case, what I'd like to point out is enable shy audio layers. For those of you who use After Effects a lot, you'll know that that's a nice space saver or real estate saver while you're compositing. And then also layer order in timeline. What this is talking about is if you've got lots of layers stacked up in your sequence, would you like to begin them by stepping upwards from the beginning of the sequence or step downwards? I like that. That's very thoughtful indeed. And then, again, I've got my Effects tab. So let's click OK. Let's bring across the composite like so. And now, over here, you can see all of the source footage has been brought across. But more importantly to me, there's the composition. And there's the composition intact with all the audio, the video, the graphics, the bug. So everything's been respected. So I've been able to trim up very precisely inside of Final Cut Pro, make things match the cut points to my audio, and now inside of After Effects I can start to work further. And indeed, there we go. The cross dissolves have been applied as opacity changes. The BCC chroma key has been respected and brought into After Effects as well. So this just brings a big smile to my face. You know, I mean, the amount of work that it takes to reconstitute a sequence like this from either Final Cut Pro or Avid into After Effects, well, that work's gone away now with Boris Transfer AE. Let me show you another example. I'm going to hide After Effects here, and There we go. Let's go to After Effects. Let's just hide that. And let's go back to Media Composer. And what I've got here, let me close my LS sequence. I've got a composite example here as well inside of Avid Media Composer. Let's load that up so you can see what's in here. In this case, what I've got is I've got a whole range of different graphic items that I've bought in. I've got an After Effects product box there. I've got Transfer FCP, I've got Transfer AE, Final Cut Studio, Media Composer 5. I've got my television graphic there. I've got this thought bubble graphic. And then on top of all of that, I've got the Boris Effects logo as well. And you can see they've all been repoed slightly so you can see them all on the screen at the same time. Obviously, I could just bring them all in exactly as they were imported if I wanted to, but in this case, I thought I'd show you that I can repo stuff and do some basic positioning and basic timing first. So I'm going to bring this across as well, again, with the audio. And so File, Export. I'm using an an AAF again that's linked. I'm not exporting any media. It's an AAF outgoing. I'm going to put it in the correct folder for myself there. Choose Save, hide that away, and then let's go back over to After Effects. Let's just close up the FCP composite example there and choose File, Import. This time I'm going to choose AAF, Avid AAF, via Boris Transfer AE. And I'm going to choose my Avid Projects folder, AAF Outgoing, and there's the Avid composite example right there. Again, we're going to be presented with our dialog. Do we need to reconnect any media? Let's have a look. Looks like we need to reconnect our audio track there, so let's just go locate that. There's our music. There it is. Open that up. And again, layers and tracks, effects and footage. Once we've got all our options squared away, we go ahead, bring that in. And now, again, all my footage is here, but so is my composite. So there it is. There are all of the individual elements that come across with their timing, their track, and of course, also, in this case, their repositioned place in the field of view. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. I certainly have enjoyed talking about it because I can see how much time Boris Transfer FCP and Boris Transfer AE are going to save me in the future. And of course, Boris Soundbite, what a wonderful application, being able to actually search media even before I've brought it into my project and start to either work with clips out of Boris Soundbite or indeed export the markers. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and of course I'll turn it back over now to the guys from Boris who will speak to some further details and maybe talk to some of your questions. Thank you very much.